If it's Wednesday, Elon Musk further escalating his fight with the White House, now calling on Congress to, quote, kill the bill, as President Trump is set to meet with key Republican senators in his latest push to get his signature bill across the finish line. Plus, hefty new tariffs on steel and aluminum imports are now in effect, with more potentially on the way, as President Trump lashes out at the Federal Reserve chair after some weaker than expected jobs data amid growing economic headwinds. And President Trump says he spoke to Russia's President Putin for more than an hour today, and that Russia will retaliate against Ukraine for its devastating and surprise drone attacks, in the latest sign that this war is far from over. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in New York, and we are tracking a flurry of activity on Capitol Hill and at the White House as President Trump and Republican leadership try to keep their conference in line. After Elon Musk, one of the president's closest and most influential allies, called the president's signature bill a, quote, disgusting abomination that would balloon the deficit, and called for the bill's supporters to be voted out of office. Mr. Musk going even further this afternoon, posting, call your senator, call your congressman. Bankrupting America is not okay. Kill the bill. We are expecting that this hour the president will meet with a key group of Senate Republicans at the White House about the way forward. And it comes after the entire Senate Republican conference huddled together this afternoon. Those meetings taking place on the heels of a new analysis by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office that backed up Musk's concerns, forecasting that the president's bill, which narrowly passed the House last week, would add $2.4 trillion to the national debt over the next decade. This morning, House Speaker Mike Johnson said he was caught off guard by Musk's criticisms, adding that hasn't been able to get Musk on the phone to talk about it.
And I left on a great note. We were texting one another, happy texts, Monday. And then yesterday, 24 hours later, he does a 180 and he comes out and opposes the bill. I think he's flat wrong. I think he's way off on this, and I've told him as much, and I've said it publicly and privately. I'm very consistent in that. And I'd love to talk to him this week and hope he calls him back today. I talk to President Trump, all the time, multiple times a day. Obviously, we've talked about this. As you know, he's not delighted that Elon did a 180 on that.
Musk's comments left some right-wing members of the House Republican Conference in a really tough place, with some members who voted yes on the package saying they agree with Musk's critiques.
Congressman, what do you make of Elon Musk criticizing the One Big Beautiful Bill?
Well, I have to agree with him. Unfortunately, in the One Big Beautiful Bill, we had to spend some money to right the ship and pass President Trump's campaign promises, which is border security. I'll write those checks all day long to Tom Homan. So do I like the price tag of the bill? No. But I want to get off of the Biden and Democrat CR that this government is currently funding on.
Now, sources close to President Trump telling NBC News that he is not happy with Musk's posts. A source with knowledge of the Trump-Musk relationship tells NBC News that the Tesla CEO may have taken issue with cuts to electric vehicle credits in the bill, while also potentially feeling upset with some recent White House personnel moves. Let's go to Washington now with the very latest. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez is outside the White House, and NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona is on Capitol Hill. So, Gabe, take me inside your conversations. I'm hearing that the president is beyond not happy, that he is furious, in fact, in part because Musk is basically threatening to primary people who support this bill. What are you hearing?
Certainly, Kristen. And look, according to a senior White House official I just spoke with, the president was caught off guard by Elon Musk's social media post, but not entirely surprised, according to this official, because the president knew that Musk had opposed the bill. They had some disagreements about it, so that wasn't entirely surprising. And this official told me that the president on Friday, during that soaring send-off that the president gave Elon Musk on Friday, it was this official said is because Trump was trying to be a nice guy. Now, it might be perhaps that he was trying to blunt some of that criticism, and perhaps he knew some of it was coming. But it has been significant over the last several days, Kristen, as you have been reporting. What will be very interesting to see right now is how the president reacts to that latest post on social media, which you referenced in your introduction, where Musk is specifically asking Americans to call their members of Congress and kill the bill. We have yet to hear from the president at this point, Kristen. And by the way, that in and of itself is interesting. The president has not engaged on camera with reporters since Friday evening. This is the 5th day that he has not spoken on camera. As you know, Kristen, that is highly unusual.
It sure is. We will wait and watch to see if we hear anything from him today or if there are any more posts. Mel, let me head over to you on Capitol Hill. What's the impact been of really this flurry of tweets on lawmakers, on senators who are trying to figure out if they're going to support this legislation?
Yeah, well, so far, Republicans publicly are downplaying the potential impact here from Elon Musk. Remember, a lot of the reason why Musk had such influence in the past with lawmakers is because they really viewed him as an extension of President Donald Trump. And in this case, they don't view him as an extension of Trump. They view him as on opposite sides of the debate. So when forced to choose between Donald Trump and Elon Musk, they're going to side with Donald Trump every single time. And even some Republicans who said they share some of Musk's concerns and complaints about fiscal deficit adding, they said they don't think that Musk himself is going to be able to kill this bill. At the same time, though, Kristen, it has been very notable that Republicans have been super careful to not publicly criticize Musk, who still has this very powerful platform and megaphone, and who also has a very hefty war chest. Just take a listen to some Republicans.
If you want to talk about specific provisions in the bill and solutions for it, I mean, this is somebody who has got a lot of insight into the U.S. government over the last 6 months. Give us some productive feedback that we can operate on. I can't operate on platitudes.
He believes, in my judgment correctly, that we're quickly becoming debt slaves, that Congress needs to re-earn the magical healing power of no, and I agree with him. Having said that, I'm not ready to throw in the towel on this bill.
And meanwhile, there does appear to be at least some level of concern or desire amongst the leadership to try to tamp down some of this public criticism. Earlier today, in a closed-door meeting, Speaker Mike Johnson defended this bill against some of Musk's criticisms. And then he also said he's been trying to get a hold of Musk through calls and text messages over the past 2 days. But so far, at least the last we heard from Johnson, the two have not connected. Kristen.
Well, Mel, you know, the Senate Republican Conference, of course, happened today. What do you think, if anything, came out of that meeting?
Well, the goal of this meeting was to try to get everyone on the same page and try to put some meat on the bones about what this Senate package is going to look like. And I'm told from sources in the room that some of the committees with the least controversial pieces of this package started presenting what their draft legislative language is going to look like. But the committee that has the most controversial piece of the bill is the Senate Finance Committee, because that has jurisdiction over not only taxes, but also over Medicaid. And it's that committee that is actually, I'm currently told, on boarding buses outside of Capitol Hill and on their way to the White House to have a meeting there, because this committee is going to be key to the Republican efforts to getting this through the Senate. And on that committee, there's actually a really wide range of views, from moderates who are concerned about Medicaid cuts to some more fiscal hawks who want to see even deeper spending cuts. So they need to resolve those issues there within that committee before they can really move forward.
Well, Mel, you set me up beautifully for my next question to Gabe. Gabe, give us a little preview of what you anticipate the president's messaging is going to be when he meets with senators on the Finance Committee there. My source is telling me he plans to be deeply engaged in every step of this, because after all, he sees this as really what will be his signature piece of legislation if he can get it passed.
Certainly, Kristen, this is so critical to his agenda, so he will be deeply involved here. And I just spoke with an official who told me that they expect the president's message to these senators to be essentially get in line. This is something that the president has done repeatedly when different types of legislation have, it falls on him to try to get over the finish line. Of course, we are far away from the finish line here, but he will see this as an opportunity to really get involved and make clear what is at stake here. Essentially, so much of the Trump agenda, these 2017 tax cuts, more funding for the military and border security, and Republicans, as we've been saying, they take issue with these CBO estimates that there will be such an increase in the deficit. So that's the bottom line message from the president to these senators in just a few moments, as he's expected to meet with them here in the White House, will be, Kristen, essentially get in line.
Well, hopefully you can get a couple of questions to those senators after the fact, Gabe. We'll be watching closely. Mel, let me ask you, because we also got a new score from the Congressional Budget Office today on the House-passed bill. What was the key takeaway there?
So there are actually two really key takeaways that I want to flag for you. This is from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. The first is that the report, this is a revised estimate, found that the bill would likely increase the debt by $2.4 trillion over a decade, and that's higher than its initial estimate, so even worse than what initially was anticipated. And secondly, the legislation would lead to 10.9 million people losing their health insurance by 2034, which is an even higher initial estimate as well. And so far, Republicans have really dismissed the CBO, attacked the CBO, said it's really underestimating the amount of growth that this bill is going to produce and saying it's missed the mark before. But Democrats already seizing on this report and will continue to do so, especially as the campaign season heats up here.
Well, there's no doubt it's going to be a part of the debate that unfolds from the White House to Capitol Hill. Gabe Gutierrez, Mel Zanona, thank you both for getting us started on what is a really busy day. Joining me now is Nebraska Republican Congressman Mike Flood. Congressman Flood, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.
Well, I'd like to start with one of the tweets by Elon Musk. As you know, he's been critiquing the bill that the House passed last month. Among a series of tweets he's made, he posted this yesterday. I'm going to read you a little bit of it. It says, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it." What is your reaction to this, Congressman Flood?
For the first time in American history, we cut $1.6 trillion in government spending. This doesn't happen overnight. This is mandatory spending. We're coming in with our first tranche of discretionary spending rescission cuts next week. This is a process. This isn't a sprint. This is a marathon. And when you cut $1.6 trillion, how can you say that's anything but a massive landmark bill, especially when you consider we also stopped 25% tax hikes on all Americans at the end of the year. I mean, you put those two things together, the only way we're going to get out of this is with less spending and more GDP growth, and that's exactly where we're going. Well,
but as you know, the CBO has said that this will add to the national debt, trillions of dollars.
Well, look at what happened in 2017 when the first tax cuts were launched. We had GDP growth a whole 1% more than the CBO initially forecast. So I don't live and die by what CBO says. I look at what happened in 2017. I know that when you keep taxes low, when you have more affordable housing tax credits, when you are doing the right things on tips and for older Americans, more money in people's pockets goes a long way, and it helps us grow our economy. And ultimately, it takes growth and spending reductions. And that's what this mandatory spending reconciliation bill does.
Well, just to be clear, Congressman, other budget experts actually say that what you're saying about what happened in 2017, not exactly the case, particularly when it's adjusted for inflation. But look, let me ask you about another tweet by Elon Musk, basically threatening to have anyone who votes for this legislation fired in 2026. What do you make of that? Does that give you pause?
Well, I know that our speaker, Mike Johnson, he's been in constant contact with Elon Musk. He shared with us that Elon wants a Republican majority in the next Congress. And, obviously, ultimately, we're all beholden to our constituents back home. Overwhelmingly, they support President Trump. President Trump had a great majority of people in my district support and vote for him. This is his big, beautiful bill. This is the Trump agenda. It's the America First agenda, and it's the agenda that I'm supporting. So I think people back home understand how important this is, and I'm hopeful that Elon and whoever else may doubt this will watch this play out and know that this is just the beginning.
Well, and again, as you know, the crux of his criticism is about the national debt, that it doesn't do enough to cut the deficit. And I want to play what you told Yahoo Finance last month, and I'll get your reaction on the other side.
Well, I tell you what, we're $36 trillion in debt, on our way to $37 trillion in debt, and this is a national security issue. So we do have to cut spending. I think as a Republican conference, we have been talking about this for the last 5 years. What do we need to do? How are we going to get there?
Look, you called the national debt a national security issue, but again, you voted for this package. And just to reiterate, the CBO is saying it will grow the debt by more than $2 trillion. So how do you square that, Congressman? How do you square supporting
exactly with what I've been saying? Unleashing America's economy, growth, plus spending cuts. You've got to have both. And I know what wouldn't grow the economy is allowing taxes to go up 25% on Americans, on Nebraskans, on people living from coast to coast in Hawaii and Alaska. That would be a job killer. That would be a dream killer. That would be terrible. So we saw it in 2017, and the economy was booming. COVID hit. Obviously a major disruptor. It took us a while to get there. And then the Biden administration comes in and spends literally billions of dollars on the IRA. So we're putting all that back together. We are going a good direction. And when you look at our discretionary spending cuts that are going to get teed up, you look at our $1.6 trillion mandatory spending cuts. I haven't seen a Congress, and I don't think you have or anybody has in a generation that's done anything like this. $1.6 trillion in spending cuts. That's real, and that is also impactful.
There are some estimates that the actual spending cuts would be a fraction of that. But let me ask you about something that you said at a town hall in May. You actually said that you hadn't read the full bill when someone was asking you why you voted in favor of a provision that would basically make it harder for judges to enforce orders holding parties before them in contempt for defying court orders. If you had known that provision was in the bill, would you have voted no, Congressman?
Well, listen, I'm going to support the One Big Beautiful Bill because it's good for America. I do not agree with that provision. And yes, I did read the bill. I read summaries of a lot of the different committees that I'm not on the bill. And I'll tell you, I support our court system. I want a federal district court to issue an injunction that has teeth. I support that process. I support the rule of law, and I'm going to steadfastly advocate that we protect the three co-equal branches of government. And I will tell you, I'm the only Republican that has flagged it, and I know that my counterparts in the Senate are taking it very seriously. I doubt it survives the Byrd review that happens over in the Senate, and I am certainly advocating that I do not think that should be in the final bill. You know, I've been a legislator for 13 years. I see bills go through the process all the time, and this is what you do. You move a piece on first round, it gets dealt with on the second round, it comes back to the House. This is something I feel strongly about, and I have communicated that to the people in my conference. I also know that we have to pass the One Big Beautiful Bill. We have to deliver tax cuts. We have to cut spending. I think we will get all of this done, and I'm confident that that provision will hopefully not be in that bill.
Congressman, just to be very clear, should you have read the bill more closely? You're saying you did read it. And if you had, would you have said, look, I'm a no on this first version. We have to make some changes here before you get to yes?
Well, here's what I did do on the bill. With things that I saw that were in the bill, I went to the committee chairman of the Committee of Jurisdiction, and I said, hey, I have an issue with this, or this is how this would affect Nebraska hospitals. I would have done that with the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. I would have done that at the WIP meeting. I would have done that at any chance I had the opportunity, because ultimately we want something that we can all agree on. I am very hopeful that this gets addressed in the Senate, and if it remains in the bill, it comes over here, I'll deal with it at that time. And might I add, I didn't see any mainstream media or not one judge or anybody identifying this before this provision was ever passed by the House. And that happens from time to time, and you deal with it. That's why we have a process. We don't do things overnight. This isn't a drive-through. You don't drive around and get your value meal and go eat it. You actually send it to the Senate. They deal with it. They send it back. I mean, I'm confident we'll deal with this. And I want to stress to you that I am a Republican that believes in the rule of law. I believe that it is important that federal district court decisions have the ability to have teeth, because we relied on that during the Biden administration to stop a lot of really bad things that he was trying to do to America.
Coming up, we're following multiple major developments impacting the economy with new tariffs now in effect on steel and aluminum imports. And President Trump airing his frustrations with China and its leaders over the state of trade talks. Plus, President Trump speaks to Russian President Putin on the phone for more than an hour. What Putin said about that devastating Ukrainian attack on Russian aircraft, and more takeaways from the rare, wide-ranging conversation. That's when we come back. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. In what appears to be another setback for any hopes of a ceasefire in the war in Ukraine, today President Trump used his social media account to share that he had spoken to Russian President Putin for more than an hour, describing the conversation as, quote, good, but not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace. According to Mr. Trump, Putin said that Russia will have to respond to Ukraine's recent drone strikes on Russian airfields. Today's conversation comes after President Trump lashed out at President Putin multiple times in recent days, including saying that Putin has, quote, gone absolutely crazy for launching multiple deadly drone and missile attacks on Ukraine. NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor joins me now. So, Yamiche, break this down. What, if any, reaction or readout are we expecting from President Trump's call from Putin?
Well, Kristen, it's become an interesting thing where President Trump is essentially writing his own readouts online. Before, we used to get these official readouts from the White House, but really we know most of what the president is saying to world leaders because of what he posts online. So what we know is he said that this is a good conversation, that Russia is also at some point going to strike back, he said, against Ukraine because of its latest attacks on Russia. But he also said that this isn't going to lead to immediate peace, this conversation that he had with President Putin. And I think it's important to continually remind people that President Trump said he could end this war on day one. He's since then said that he was joking and that this is going to take longer and it's harder to deal with. But what's interesting here is that the president is essentially saying there is some progress being made. That being said, it's unclear to me and to most people that are talking about this and experts on this war now whether or not this continued conversation is actually going to lead to peace in Ukraine, Kristen.
Well, and just following up on that point, that had been a key campaign promise for Mr. Trump, that he could effectively end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. And that has proven more difficult than he anticipated. What are your sources saying within the White House about the state of mind of the president and where he sees things going from here?
Well, it's really interesting. When I talk to White House officials, they essentially are saying that he's really trying to understand the frame of mind of President Putin. Just last week, he was calling President Putin, quote, absolutely crazy, saying that he was going after people and needlessly killing Ukrainians, that he needed to change, and he didn't really understand what was going on with Putin. Now, today we have a complete change of tone where he's saying they had a good conversation. Then you have the Kremlin. Last week, they were saying that President Trump was suffering from what they called, quote, emotional overload. Now, today, they're saying essentially that this is a conversation that was productive, but it's just unclear sort of where things are. It's a sort of roller coaster. And from my sources and talking to people in the White House, it seems that President Trump is still trying to figure out how to understand what President Putin wants to get from this war and how, if at all, he could bring this to an end. Because short of Russia taking over Ukraine completely, it's not clear, at least from my understanding, to President Trump what Russia might ultimately get from this that would satisfy them, Kristen.
Yamiche, let's go from foreign policy to domestic policy. The Trump administration now escalating its feud with Columbia University. Talk about what the Department of Education did today.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The Department of Education is saying that Columbia University is failing to meet the standards for accreditation. They're saying that they violated federal non-discrimination rules and laws, saying in part that after October 7th and that attack by Hamas on Israel, that Columbia University essentially failed to protect its Jewish students from harassment. So they're now essentially recommending that its accreditation be pulled through a commission that basically decides accreditation. It's not clear, though, whether or not the commission will actually pull accreditation, but we should underscore that accreditation means money. We're talking about millions, if not billions of dollars in federal aid, student loans, and Pell Grants. We should also remind folks that it was in March that the Trump administration already canceled a number of contracts with Columbia University for millions of dollars, something like $400 million. So this is in some ways the Trump administration upping the ante here, Kristen.
All right, Yamiche Alcindor. Yamiche, thank you so very much. Really appreciate it. We want to turn now to the economy and some potentially ominous jobs numbers ahead of Friday's monthly jobs report from the Labor Department. ADP reported that private sector payrolls increased by just 37,000 last month. That's the lowest monthly job total by ADP in more than 2 years. President Trump responded by calling out Fed Chair Jerome Powell on social media and calling on him once again to lower interest rates. The weak jobs report came on the same day that the latest tariffs on steel and aluminum imports are taking effect, doubling from 25% to 50%. Today is also the Trump administration's self-imposed deadline for other countries to submit their best offers on trade deals. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters yesterday the deadline is a friendly reminder that so-called reciprocal tariffs that the president announced in April will take effect on July 8th if no agreements are in place. NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans is with me now. Christine, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here. Let's start with the steel and aluminum tariffs. If they do remain in place, what do you anticipate they will mean for consumers, and what products are going to increase in price?
You know, all kinds of products: canned food, machinery, cars, construction, housing construction. I could go all the way down the list. I mean, I've been talking to business owners who are saying this is an important input, if you will, in a lot of things that consumers see and feel. And so even now, businesses are saying that the things that they had stockpiled ahead of these tariffs, those are winding down, and in the weeks ahead, consumers will see higher prices.
So, Christine, let's talk about this ADP jobs report. It obviously precedes the job report we're going to get on Friday. Talk about the significance of ADP and the fact that it was lower than expectations.
So this is just the private sector. You know, the government report is bigger, but this gives you a little window into what's happening with private companies. And you can see that they're not hiring as much as they normally do, only 37,000 jobs there. And you also saw a loss in manufacturing jobs, which is ironic because the whole trade agenda of the White House, of this president, is to boost manufacturing, but you're seeing manufacturing declining. Why? Because of higher input costs. Manufacturers import things, too, to make stuff in the United States. So domestic manufacturers are really being hurt right now by some policies that are meant to help domestic manufacturers. So we'll watch to see if that is mirrored in the report on Friday from the government.
Well, you take me to my next question. I mean, and I guess typically do we see that Friday in some ways is a reflection of what you get in the ADP jobs report?
Sometimes it is. Friday's jobs report is a little more fulsome. It's got two different surveys, and I'm not going to geek out on you and tell you why, but this is why.
You always have an invitation to geek out.
Thank you. It's why it's the gold standard. It's why that's the one we really use, because it measures both businesses and workers. So I really want to get into there and see what exactly that's telling us. It's been resilient, and the U.S. economy heading into this trade drama was in a really good spot. And it is weathering this, I think, better than a lot of people thought it would. And that's something the White House will point to, too. You've got inflation, the CPI number really around like a 4-year low. That's good. The job market's still churning ahead, but we don't know if there's a point where that starts to turn, which is why we're watching these numbers so carefully.
Yeah, well, a White House official very bullish on what they're going to get on Friday. We'll have to see.
Is that
the
so?
numbers show.
Okay.
Yes, we shall see. Christine Romans, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great to see you, as always. Really appreciate it. Coming up next, NBC News exclusive reporting on the sweeping nationwide immigration crackdown underway right now to ramp up arrests and removals, and how the president's push for mass deportations is reshaping every corner of federal law enforcement. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. We've got some NBC News exclusive reporting to bring you now on just how far the Trump administration is going to go to implement its immigration policies. My NBC News colleagues are reporting on a sweeping new ICE operation that is so large that it's reshaping federal law enforcement. 3 sources familiar with the immigration crackdown tell NBC News that the effort, dubbed Operation at Large, includes more than 5,000 personnel from multiple federal law enforcement agencies, including DHS, the FBI, the U.S. Marshals Service, the DEA, and even the IRS. That's in addition to Customs and Border Protection. The Department of Homeland Security has also requested the use of 21,000 National Guard members, but that has yet to be approved. NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley helped to break that story now. She joins me. Julia, congratulations on the great report. Thank you for being here. So let's delve into this. What is Operation at Large, and how did it really come about here?
Kristen, I can even update us even further based on information we've seen today, just since our report published. But what we initially found out was that there were 5,000 people taken from DOJ. That includes the FBI, ATF, and DEA, as well as the IRS, CBP, and you mentioned the National Guard, though that has yet to be approved, to try to create the largest force ever created to go out and help ICE make mass arrests. This follows those tense meetings from Stephen Miller and ICE leadership where he threatened to start firing people if they didn't start arresting 3,000 immigrants per day. And based on what my producer, Dee Martinez, is now seeing in downtown Manhattan today, she's been able to watch as many, as she says, over a dozen immigrants have reported for ICE check-ins and have been arrested by people who don't appear to necessarily be ICE agents. They're not wearing uniforms, and when they get into these cars, it simply says federal law enforcement. That could be Operation at Large now in play. Based on what we understand, this started to get going last Monday on May 26th. They've been ramping up, and now it's a big part of why we're seeing immigration arrest balloon just this week. And we're hearing that from immigration attorneys nationwide as well. And that what they're seeing is that they aren't just going after criminals, the worst of the worst, as Tom Homan often talks about, that really we're seeing a lot more arrest of non-criminal immigrants, some people who even have pending asylum applications. And again, it's not always clear who's doing the arrest.
So, okay, given all of those questions that you just outlined, Julia, talk about the legal challenges that the administration is bracing for here.
Well, there could be a number of legal challenges. Of course, you could say that some of these people have pending immigration arrest or pending immigration cases, and they should be released, and that they shouldn't be detained. You could see some habeas petitions in those cases, or some petitions if they are about to be deported. But in terms of using federal law enforcement to make those arrests, in many cases, they're allowed to do that. If they have the authority under the U.S. Criminal Code to make arrests, they're allowed to do that.
All right. Julia Ainsley, thank you so very much. And congrats again on a great report. Really appreciate it. After the break, Democrats in Congress look to counter President Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill and respond to Elon Musk's criticism. My one-on-one interview with a top Senate Democrat is next. You're watching Meet the Press now.
How does Musk's opposition change your approach to fight against this bill?
Well, Musk's opposition shows how bad, if even Elon Musk, who's been part of the whole process and as Trump's buddy says the bill is bad, you can imagine how bad this bill is.
Welcome back. That was Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer saying he agrees with Elon Musk and his opposition to President Trump's, quote, big, beautiful bill. Schumer is one of the many Democrats who are seizing on Musk's comments, calling the bill a, quote, disgusting abomination. Joining me now is Democratic Senator from Oregon, Jeff Merkley. Senator Merkley, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you here on what I know is going to be a very busy week for all of you. You posted on X that you agree with Elon Musk. So, Senator, what's the strategy now beyond agreeing with Elon Musk? What are your next steps here?
Well, it is an abomination. Not for all the reasons that I would share with Musk, but one of the concerns is certainly debt, and it's debt being run up to fund tax breaks for the very richest Americans. And so that part we can agree on. That's a huge mistake. But it also cuts some, now with the new estimate, some 16 million Americans will lose health care to fund tax breaks for billionaires. 4 million children will go hungry to fund tax breaks for billionaires. I mean, that's incredible. This is families lose and billionaires win. Why would anyone want to vote for that bill?
Well, so Musk, it's based on all of my reporting, one of the things that he's most opposed to is the fact that there is no EV mandate. And obviously that would help his company of Tesla. Given the fact that his opposition, at least in part, is due to his personal business, does that align with your opposition, and does it complicate your opposition, Senator?
Oh, you know, I've heard him talk about the debt. I hadn't heard him talk about the EV mandate. But I must say, in the broader sense, what is being eliminated from in this bill are the tax credits that support renewable energy. And so we have actually, even without the tax credits, renewable energy is less expensive and obviously cleaner than fossils. But what this bill does is says, let's get rid of the clean, cheaper energy and replace it with dirty, more expensive energy. And in to the sense that that lines up with support for electric vehicles, I think we're in agreement.
Well, let me ask you about something else that Elon Musk posted on X. This was last night. He wrote, in November next year, we fire all politicians who betrayed the American people. I can tell you, I've been talking to sources close to the White House. They are concerned that that's a betrayal. They believe that means that he could potentially be considering supporting Democratic candidates over Republicans who vote for this bill. Should Democrats take Elon Musk's money?
Well, you know, I don't take any corporate money. And I'm certainly going to take Elon Musk. He's been so closely associated with such devastation. Just the fact that he illegally and unconstitutionally dismantled agencies and impounded funds, and is let alone enough reason to say no, thank you, Elon. Why don't you donate those funds to charity and do some good things in the world with your money?
So, Senator, just to be very clear, is that your message to your fellow Democratic senators, that they should say no thank you if Elon Musk were to offer the money?
I'll let them reach their own decisions on that. But my message is that dark money, and this is what the Citizens United court decision has done, is completely corrupting our political system. When the crypto world can put $40 million into a Senate race, as they did in Ohio, or $20 million into some other races, and the ordinary citizen, one, has to act publicly and has limits, what we're seeing is big business is basically buying government buying for big business. I believe in government buying for the people. So we need some fundamental reforms when it comes to money in politics.
Let me ask you about crypto, the Genius Act that would basically regulate crypto, specifically your amendment that would basically prohibit the president and other officials from profiting off of stable coins. What do you say to people who think you only introduced this legislation now because there's a Republican in the White House?
I would say take a look at the fact that I've introduced the stock trading bill going back now 12 years, that we shouldn't be engaged in owning assets that are defined with very large political or legislative issues, own a diversified stock fund. But in this case, there's even more involved here. And that is the fact that if any elected officials is offering say a meme coin for sale, a meme coin is like a digital baseball card. They're basically saying, look, you give me your money and I will give you an email with a picture of a coin on it. It's just an open invitation to give me money openly, but why? Because you want access and influence. It's government for sale. It is the same situation with the Trump family. A different type of crypto coin. It's one used in international transactions. It's called a stable coin. But the Trump family gets to keep all of the profits from investing that money, including all the profits from investing the $2 billion from the company associated with the United Arab Emirates. It's absolute corruption. UAE wanted something. They wanted AI chips. Essentially, when Trump went to the Middle East, he said, we'll give you AI chips. And so this is open corruption. It has to end.
Let me ask you, broadly speaking, about the Democratic Party. I want to put up something that Senator Bernie Sanders said in an interview with The Guardian. He said, quote, their weaknesses, I think that their credibility is now quite low, and they don't have much of a message for working people other than to say Trump is dangerous. I think that's just not enough. Of course, that's from Senator Sanders, who's an independent who caucuses with the Democrats. Do you agree with Senator Bernie Sanders?
I do agree with Bernie Sanders. For example, the dream of homeownership is dying. We need to be saying, no, we're going to restore it. And here's how we're going to restore it. We're going to get the hedge funds out of this business. And here's another factor. We pay more for drugs than any people in any developed nation, even though we invest more taxpayer money in the development of those drugs. We should never be charged than anyone in any other nation. And by the way, Bobby Kennedy and President Trump agree. So let's have a bipartisan effort to make that happen. Those are real solutions for real challenges people face.
Very quickly, two more questions. You're up for re-election in 2026. Some of your Democratic colleagues have said they're not running for re-election. What say you, Senator? Are you going to run for re-election?
Well, you know, every 6-year cycle, Mary, my wife, and I make the decision. We'll make it in due course, as we always have. And so people can keep asking, but when we make a decision, we'll let the world know.
All right, well, come back and tell us here, Senator. We'd love to have your final decision. And speaking of decisions, we learned today that former White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says she's leaving the Democratic Party, switching her affiliation to independent, according to the publisher of her new book. What was your reaction to hearing that?
Well, I hadn't heard it until just now. I'm going to be very interested in what she has to say. Maybe she's trying to send a message like the one that Bernie and I are putting forward, is that we need to be aggressive in creating government buy-in for the people, not the powerful.
All right, Senator Jeff Merkley, thank you. And I do mean it. Please come back once you've made that final decision. We really appreciate it. And still to come, the Musk effect. The world's richest man rages against House Republicans and says they should all be voted out of office next November. We have lots of politics to get to with the panel. That's next. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. As we've been reporting, Elon Musk further escalated his fight with the White House this afternoon, posting on X that Congress should, quote, kill the bill. It comes just days after President Trump hosted a big farewell to Musk in the Oval Office, and Musk promised to remain a friend and advisor to Trump. Joining me now to discuss all of this is the host of Way Too Early on MSNBC, Ali Vitale, Democratic strategist and MSNBC political analyst Basil Smikle, and senior writer for the National Review, Noah Rothman. Thanks to all of you for being here in New York with me. Ali, I have to start with you. Talk about how extraordinary it is that we have seen this flurry of tweets from Elon Musk. They are incredibly strongly worded, and one Trump source said it really feels like a betrayal to a lot of folks inside Trump's orbit.
I'm sure they feel that way, and yet now you're seeing up be down on Capitol Hill, where Democrats are saying, I actually agree with Elon Musk, and Republicans are actually trying to just tiptoe around, because I'm not sure they know which way is up on this. Because if you think about it, Republicans, including the congressman that you had on earlier in the show, have done a lot, even in front of their constituents, as angry as they've been, defending Musk, defending DOGE, putting it in the context of Republicans notching wins on cutting spending and now on reconciliation. So they've got to be really careful here. The other question is, when Musk says, let's vote them out in a year, does that mean that all of a sudden he's spending again and it's on the other side of the equation? I mean, there's a lot of potential fallout in the long term, and that's nothing to say of reconciliation.
One Republican said that's the big concern, that Elon Musk's money, Noah, will go to Democrats. What are you hearing about the impact? And as Ali says, it's a little disorienting because so many Republicans have spent so much time and capital defending Elon Musk and his DOGE cuts.
I'm hearing that the administration and Republicans are very frustrated, and they're trying to stifle this until it becomes, so it doesn't become an all-out conflagration and a war within the party. I suspect that they don't want Elon Musk to contribute to primary opponents as opposed to, say, Democrats in a general election. I appreciate the zeal with which Elon Musk approached this issue. He kind of took Republican. He took a conservative's approach to Washington on a speed run, going all in on cutting government spending and countering all the constituencies who have a say in that matter, which is why you can't run government like a business, and then becoming very disillusioned in the process. That usually takes us years. It took him several months to get through this. My favorite was in December when he said we were flirting with a shutdown, and he said, well, maybe if we shut down government, Americans will look around and say we don't need this much government. This is something conservatives tell themselves about once a generation, and we find out it never works.
But this is also the last time that he went on a tweet storm. It reminds me of then being in the halls of Congress and members trying to figure out, okay, well, Elon hates the bill. I'm not going to vote for it now, but where does that leave me?
Where does that leave me? Where does that leave Democrats, Basil? Here's a little bit of what we're hearing from Democrats. Speaking of up being down, take a listen.
I hear something happened while we were at lunch, which led me to make some news here today and say something I didn't think was imaginable. I agree with Elon Musk.
Breaking news, Elon Musk and I agree with each other.
Basil, well, at least they're on the same page in their messaging.
Well, to Ali's point, this is Stranger Things upside down world. Can make sense of it. And to the extent that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries agree with Elon Musk in that statement, it should stop there. We joke about this, but we have to remember all the damage that he did. And going into a conference, what was it, CPAC, with a buzzsaw, chainsaw, making light of the jobs that he cut. This is something that Democrats should be running on. They should not take his money, and they should press ahead and say that, you know, and continue to tie Elon Musk to Donald Trump and his policies. Don't let up off the gas.
Senator Jeff Merkley, you just heard, said his message to his Democratic colleagues is absolutely don't take the money.
Right.
But do you think that if that were to come to pass, that a number of Democrats would actually adhere to that?
If you wonder why some people don't like the Democratic Party and have issues with them, it's because you can't be on one side today and the other side tomorrow. And if you're trying to mobilize voters against Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the things that they've done, stand up for veterans, stand up for all of these folks who were laid off, stand up for the people who do research that had their money pulled, you can't then go back and say, hey, we love this guy. Yeah. That's what voters don't like. It's the hypocrisy. So, yeah, I would stay away from it.
Well, Ali, just, you know Capitol Hill. You've covered Capitol Hill. Now the really tough negotiations and discussions begin. We know the Senate Finance Committee members are going to meet with President Trump at the White House. I'm told he is going to be very involved. He's already working the phones, trying to get senators on his side, because before Elon Musk started tweeting, you had a number of senators coming out and saying this adds to the deficit. And, oh, by the way, it's also going to cut Medicaid.
And I'm not sure that Trump being apprised and involved at every stage of this is actually going to be helpful, because he's been known to throw some wrenches into the process late in the game. And we are late in the game. I mean, I know we're only technically at halftime because the House has done its work and now it's the Senate's turn. But the more changes that get made, the harder it is to kick it back to the House side and keep the margins as they were, which is to say herding the cats in the direction towards victory. Johnson was able to do it once, but there is concern there, especially when you've got people like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, oh, wait, I'm learning about new provisions because apparently you can't speed read a 1,200-page bill. I actually tried.
I'm sure you tried.
Oh, I did.
Times. But Noah, pick up on that point, because we have seen Trump come in at the 11th hour and help Johnson get a range of different things over the finish line. Does this moment feel different to you?
No. Not really, unfortunately.
So
but
you think this gets passed ultimately?
I think it has to pass. That's the whole strategy with the big, beautiful bill, as it were. It is literally too big to fail. And I don't think this president would be able to, well, the Republicans in general wouldn't be able to run if the tax cuts expired and they were to come back to their constituents and say, we raised taxes on everybody. Sorry, we had one job and we failed. One thing I will say about Elon Musk, we've been dumping all over him, but he did something extraordinary. He went to Washington, said, I'm going to cut spending, and then he cut spending.
Significantly by less than he said.
By much less than he said, to a degree that I don't think you could call it very much a spending cut. But the initiative was there, and it succeeded on those terms and those terms narrowly. He's right to be frustrated with this bill. Conservatives should be frustrated with this bill. But Donald Trump has never been a tax cutter. He's never been a spending cutter, and he's gonna get very nervous if people start telling him, listen, we're going to cut Medicare, which is where most of the savings come from, and people are going to lash out at Republicans in 2026 because of it.
All right, let's talk about the Democrats now, Basil. We learned today that former President Biden's former press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, says she's now an independent. It's a striking move because she was literally the spokesperson for the Democrats. Yeah. What do you make of this announcement, not just in terms of what it says for Karine, but what does it say about the state of the Democratic Party right now?
Well, I have to say I've known Karine for 20 years. You know, she probably had a really tough year. Last year was a really hard year for us for a lot of reasons, not just the losing, but it was also that you had high-level people in the party do something that I've never seen before, find a way to unseat the sitting president of your party, the sitting president of the United States who happens to be of your party. Never seen that before. And so I do think there's a lot of introspection going on within the Democratic Party. You know, a lot of young voters aren't registering as Democrats. They're registering as independents. So there's a branding problem. There's not just a branding problem. There's a messaging problem. What do Democrats stand for? And by the way, where is the Democratic plan for 2028 or whatever the case is? Where is the Democratic version of Project 2025? I think that's what folks are calling out for. And maybe it takes stepping away from it to be able to author something like that.
Yeah, Ali, it's part of what independent Senator Bernie Sanders is saying when he spoke to The Guardian, which is that Democrats do not have a message or a strategy, and we only have about 20 seconds left.
Well, I'm not going to solve the problems in that time. All I'll say is that I think that this is a bug, not a feature for Democrats. They've got bigger problems to solve for than keeping the former press secretary in the party, though my text messages have been lit.
I bet. We'd like to read those text messages. Great conversation. Ali, Basil, and Noah, thank you all. Thank you for watching. We're back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now, but the news continues with my friend Hallie Jackson right now.